Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. There are about 14 of us, 13 of us. I'm Joanna Sinwell. I am on the Education Committee and on the board of our NAMI of Johnson County. And I'm glad you've all been able to join us today. We have Leslie Carpenter, who's going to be talking about AOT, is short for Assisted Outpatient Treatment. Leslie, I'll read a bio here. Leslie is a co-founder of Iowa Mental Health Advocacy, a lobbyist in the Iowa legislature, and a serious brain illness advocate. She is a retired physical therapist who now works to improve the mental health treatment system. She serves on the NAMI Iowa Board of Directors and teaches 3 of the NAMI signature programs. Her most recent emphasis is on the NAMI provider training. She provides advocacy presentations to a wide variety of audiences to help people understand the causes of mental health crises, and she wants to humanize it and share practical solutions. She has lived it. She has a son with a serious mental illness. Leslie's leading an effort in the 6th Judicial District in Iowa to create an AOT, Assisted Outpatient Treatment Program, in conjunction with Iowa's first civil mental health court. She serves on the University of Iowa Psychiatry Patient and Family Advisory Council and on the GuideLeak Center Advisory Board as a family member with lived experience to help improve the treatment of people with serious brain illnesses in hospital and crisis settings. She and her husband, Scott, have 2 adult children, one of whom lives with a severe schizoaffective disorder. Leslie and Scott received the Isabel Turner Award from the Iowa City Human Rights Commission in 2020 for their advocacy work. She's a board member. She used to be a board member too of our Johnson County NAMI, and she brought me onto the board. So I have a lot to thank her for, as well as for all of her advocacy. And thank you for joining us today, Leslie. I'll let you take over.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like I need to update that bio because we have actually started the AOT program. Yay!
Wonderful. Yay!
So that's wonderful news. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So thank you for your patience for a moment here. So today I'm going to be talking with you about AOT, which is just one solution. And I just want to make that point on the continuum of care. It's just one piece that we can have in our toolbox to help people that are really sick. So why do we need it? Well, one of the most vexing problems that exists for people who have really serious brain illnesses like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar disorders is that many people do not stay adherent to treatment, right? They won't take their medications. And this is a very frustrating situation for families, for doctors, for first responders. Lots of us intersect with people who are not willing or not able to take their medication and stay in treatment. And, you know, when we started out as family members, we really thought this was all about just denial and maybe some of these other things like side effects of medications, right? Because we know that the psychotropic medications are really difficult. They have a lot of horrible side effects. But actually, the biggest reason of all that people do not stay adherent with treatment is something called anosognosia. And initially, the doctors would say to Scott and me, your son has a lack of insight. And what we heard, not knowing any better at that point in time, was your son is stupid. And honestly, our son is still not stupid. And yet he's completely unaware of his illness. And this is due to changes in the frontal and parietal lobes of the brain that are very much part of the brain illness itself. So what we're talking about here is very different than somebody who's newly diagnosed with diabetes, who doesn't want to have to bother with insulin or diet or exercise, right? Their brain is fully intact, and it's their pancreas that's sick. In this case, though, the brain itself is sick, and part of that sickness, it makes the person unaware of their own illness. So to say to somebody, you need to take an antipsychotic, makes no sense to them, because it's just like if you were talking to somebody who didn't have diabetes and said, hey, I really think you need to take insulin. And to describe this a little bit better, instead of my layman's words, I'm going to let you listen to and watch a short video on this.
Anosognosia. Anosognosia is exactly what I think he had. I believe that my son, Chris, over the course of repeated breakdowns, lost his capacity to understand his illness. So he went off his meds, and that's when we lost him for good. He never took meds again. He ultimately chose to take his life rather than take medication.
People with anosognosia have a real neurological condition caused by damage to the brain, most likely in the frontal and parietal lobes. Because of this condition, they can't recognize that they are sick. Anosognosia is associated with a lot of diseases. Some people with strokes, brain tumors, Alzheimer's disease, and Huntington's disease suffer from this same lack of insight. And it's very clear that about half the people with schizophrenia and roughly 40% of the people with bipolar disorder have some degree of anosognosia. In other words, they don't recognize their own illness. And we recognize this for Alzheimer's disease, but we seem to have trouble recognizing that this is also common for people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Russell Weston is one tragic example. Mr. Weston came to Washington, D.C. to, quote, save the world from cannibals, and killed 2 Capitol police officers while in this delusional state.
When the cannibals, I have control of the Ruby satellite system, and they are being criminally prosecuted for murder and cannibalism, then they say, well, the Ruby time reverse system means that they are not permanently dead, so they cannot be criminally prosecuted for murder.
But how about you being prosecuted and having control of the time sweep?
Well, that's
Could
like
you
saying,
just make them come alive by your choice?
Yes, I can do that, yes.
But you wouldn't?
I usually do not know.
Weston was not taking medication because he did not believe he was sick.
If theoretically A.J. and Barry did recommend an insanity defense, would you go along with it?
No.
Why not?
That is not advantageous to my position.
Okay. First of all, do you perceive yourself as being mentally ill?
No.
All right. Is that the primary reason that you'd reject an insanity defense?
That is correct, yes.
Bexar County Judge Polly Jackson Spencer developed the first of its kind outpatient commitment program in Texas. She saw the devastation caused when the severely mentally ill are too sick to seek treatment and end up trapped in a revolving door of incarceration, homelessness, hospitalization, and victimization.
You can't simply tell someone who has a mental illness and is disorganized in their thinking, hey, you've got a doctor's appointment in 3 weeks and it's, 10 miles from here. These are the different buses you need to take to get there, and don't forget to go, and assume that they're going to make that. That's just not going to happen.
Judge Oscar Kazin supervises the day-to-day operations of Bexar County's court-ordered outpatient treatment program. He meets regularly with patients, psychiatrists, and staff.
When I sit in that little courtroom down in the basement of that abandoned hospital at the San Antonio State Hospital, the guy who sits at the end of the chair, that mentally ill patient, didn't have a choice. He didn't wake up one morning and say, I want to lose my life. I want to lose my sanity. These people had no choice in the matter. And it's our responsibility to bring them back to sanity. They didn't choose it.
It's very important to understand that anosognosia is the #1 reason why people fail to seek treatment. It's up to the rest of us to make sure that they are able to get treatment.
I like this analogy, and I stole this analogy from Eric Smith, who is somebody who is an AOT graduate. And the point he made was that for somebody who doesn't know they're sick, even if we had the very best mental health care system at the top of those stairs here in Iowa, which obviously we don't, but even if we did, for somebody who doesn't know they're sick, they have no way to access that treatment, right? Not on a consistent basis. It is just like somebody who is paralyzed, sitting in a wheelchair with no access to an elevator or a ramp. They have no means to get to the treatment. So in 2018, my husband Scott and I worked to improve Iowa's commitment law with the help of the Treatment Advocacy Center to allow for AOT, or assisted outpatient treatment. And Governor Reynolds signed that into law in March of that year. And I love this picture of her because she's standing there very graciously taking a picture with us, but she likely has no idea who we are, or even that our little bill made it onto her big bill. But it doesn't matter because it got done. And ever since then, we've been working and doing things to bring this program to Iowa. So one of the first things we did is we were invited by the treatment advocacy to bring a team of people down to Ohio to visit several AOT programs and mental health courts. And I will tell you that walking into this courthouse in Butler County, I had a pit of dread in my stomach because it suddenly occurred to me that I was in a courthouse and in a courtroom. And I didn't want to have to see mental health care happening in a courtroom, right? I had always associated courthouses with criminal proceedings. And yet, what I learned and saw was that even to this day, the best mental health care I've ever witnessed has taken place in these courtrooms. And it's very much because they come at this with the attitude of support and not fear, right? One of the first things Judge Randy Rogers said to us was, we never ever dreamed that we should be using punishment to treat people with cancer. Why did we ever start doing that to people who have mental illnesses? And it works really well via something called the black robe effect. And initially, I thought that was all about that effect on the patient, right? Oh, they're going to tell my son to comply with treatment and they'll have more respect and authority and he'll listen to them, whereas he won't listen to us and the doctors. But actually, it's really about the effect on the treatment system too. And that's because what happens all too often to people who are very non-compliant or non-adherent to treatment and they need to go back into the hospital repetitively is pretty soon nobody's going to be willing to treat them. And believe you me, that happened to us. We'd have doctors come and say, your son is very, very sick. He really does need a higher level of care, but we're tired of having to get him readmitted because he's non-compliant. So we're firing your son. Best of luck to you, right? The people who are the most sick have the least access to providers and treatment. Well, when you gather your group of stakeholders and get people to agree to prioritize these patients who need the healthcare the most, suddenly you build in this big missing piece of our mental health care system in Iowa, and that's called accountability. Suddenly, when the judge is expecting a progress report about how the person's doing, that provider is going to be sending in a progress report to say, hey, the patient's coming in, we're having good visits, he's sleeping through the night, it seems he's taking his medication, or not, right? Whatever the situation might be. Suddenly, there's accountability to the court and to the other members of the team. And it's a whole team with a vested interest in the well-being of the person, not just the family members, where most of us don't have enough knowledge, skills, training, resources to take care of these people who are the most sick. We just can't do it on our own. And most often it just doesn't work. Now, nobody is held down and medicated against their will. I want to make that point really clear. This is an outpatient treatment civil commitment, which have been in existence here in Iowa for a long time. If somebody stops taking their medications and they're not adherent to treatment, the same thing's going to happen that's already been happening. Eventually, they're going to deteriorate. They're going to be appropriate to be put back into the hospital, and they'll convert that outpatient order over to an inpatient order, and back to the hospital they'll go to get stabilized again, right? The advantage of this is that they're doing more consistent monitoring and engagement and talking with the person so they can recognize that deterioration much sooner, and if appropriate, make that transition sooner so the brain isn't sitting there in an active psychosis for so long, sustaining further brain damage. And they do an increased level of engagement with a person. They don't have conversations that go, hey, are you taking your meds? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've had lots of those conversations and they don't go anywhere. Instead, what they do is they engage and talk with a person via motivational interviewing and say, okay, tell us what your goals are. Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to get an apartment and live on your own? Do you want to be able to get a job and keep it? Do you want to regain custody of your children? Whatever their goals are, then they work with that treatment team and social worker, and they help to get the supports in place to help that person meet those goals. And along the way, they're having regular meetings with the patient, usually on a weekly basis at first, to help the person to gradually see, hey, have you noticed that since you've been staying on your medications, it's been easier to attend the classes and stay in school or to keep your job or whatever it might be that they're working on. And that increased level of engagement and support really is the magic that does the difference for this. And it works really well. In New York State, they've been doing this for over 20 years via Kendra's law. And what they have found is a 77% reduction in psychiatric hospitalizations. And those lengths of stays tend to be shorter. 83% reduction in arrest, 74% reduction in homelessness, and an 87% reduction in incarceration. These are much better outcomes than we've been achieving here in Iowa so far for people who are this sick, this small subset of patients. And here's the research that really has me excited. Dr. Dan Garza is the doc in Queens County who runs their program there. And what he has found is that if they can keep people in treatment for 12 to 18 months, and I want to remind you that I'm talking about outpatient treatment, right? If they do that, about 90% of them are making that key connection between staying on their meds and being able to stay out of the hospital or stay out of jail. And that tracks, because if we think back to the 1970s or so, when people could go to the hospital when they're having that first psychosis, and they could stay long enough to get the meds figured out, actually have them come to, reasonable therapeutic blood serum levels to stabilize them. They could learn about, what is psychosis or schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever it is. And then they would get discharged maybe 6 months to 9 months to a year and a half later, and they would do much better, right? They came out much more functional than how we're presently achieving this for people in Iowa. And of course, if you're keeping people out of repeated hospitalizations and out of repeated jails and interactions with crisis services, we are going to save money. That's a piece of it. So when we got back to Iowa, we said, okay, so what's the situation in Iowa? And at this time, this was back in 2019, we had 47 problem-solving courts, but only 5 of them were mental health courts, and they were criminal mental health courts. But hey, we went to go see the one over in Scott County, because it was close to us and we've been there a couple times, and we found that actually it runs pretty much the same way and they are getting very similar outcomes. Yay. So in the summer of 2019, we formed the first civil mental health court planning team. And at the time it was being led by Ellie Gould, who is the woman in the brownish shirt here in the front row. Because at that time she was our jail diversion director for Johnson County with the sheriff's office. And later on, she ended up leaving that position and we kind of floundered for a while. The treatment advocacy team really advised me just to go ahead, since nobody else would step up, go ahead and be the leader of the team. So I did, even though I'm not really having an official role, but we still managed to grow the team. And now we have all of the key stakeholders on board and supportive of this in one way or another. We have the sheriff's office, we have GuideLink for the Access Center, NAMI, obviously, Johnson County. We had local officials, the VA hospitals, Abbey Community Mental Health, which is important because they're a big piece of the outpatient treatment here. We had the University Hospital, the VA Hospital, Shelter House, the County Attorney's Office. You can kind of see we have a wide swath of the community people that would need to be supportive of this program. The good news is about a year ago, we received funding for a 2-year pilot of the program from the East Central Region, MHDS region. And with that, we were able to go ahead and hire on Carrie Crane, who is our AOT program director. She came with a long history of already working in assertive community treatment for another agency up in Lynn County. And we've also been able to have hire on Don Schroeder, who is our judicial referee, and just recently hired on Patty Christensen, who is the peer support specialist who's going to be working with the program. And the program started about 3 weeks ago with status hearings, and I think they have about 4 people currently admitted to the program to get started. So some of you might wonder, well, if you already had the model for a criminal mental health court, why not just open up another criminal mental health court? And it comes down to a couple different reasons. One is that isn't the treatment model for assisted outpatient treatment. It is very much associated with a civil mental health court. The other reason is with these very serious brain disorders, we really can't prevent them. right? We don't have the medication, the science behind us to prevent somebody from developing one of these genetic, biological brain illnesses, unfortunately. Our best opportunity to help people is with early, consistent treatment. So we wanted to be able to provide this level of collaborative care, right? Sooner, before the person becomes so sick that they intersect with the criminal justice system in the first place. We want to try to help keep as many brains healthier, like the one on the left, and have fewer of them end up as sick as the one on the right. So who's appropriate for this program? It's obviously not for everybody with a mental illness. I want to say that we have a lot of people in our lives that have depression or anxiety, and who are completely compliant and aware of their illnesses and doing well. They don't need this. This is very much for somebody with a very serious or chronic brain illness like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar, and in some cases, maybe major depressive disorder. And we will accept people with or without a co-occurring substance use disorder. That was a really important component for me, especially because we know that a lot of people with these very serious brain illnesses also have a co-occurring substance use disorder. And isolating out the treatment for one versus the other really hasn't been shown to be effective. We really need to include the treatment for both. So those are the people that we're really targeting with this program. Also, the person needs to qualify and be appropriate for a current outpatient committal order pursuant to Code Chapter 229. If they don't meet that criteria, they're not going to need this program, right? And the person needs to have a lack of adherence with treatment history. So 2 or more hospitalizations or acts of violence. And it's been demonstrated that the person needs treatment to prevent relapse or deterioration, which would result in harm to themselves or others. And the person's very much documented to be unlikely to voluntarily participate in necessary treatment. And believe you me, we have a lot of people in our community that fit these criteria that we can be helping. You will notice one group of diagnoses that are not on here. This is not going to help somebody with various types of personality disorders. I think it's cluster C. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the current terminology on that. But it has not been shown to be an effective treatment modality for somebody with like a borderline personality disorder. So they're not appropriate to be treated in this program. And they do need to be an adult, and they do need to reside in Johnson County for this program. How do you make a referral to the program? You contact Carrie, and I'm giving you her email address and her work cell phone number, and also the phone number for the GuideLink Center where she has her office located. So I'm going to give you all a minute to take a screenshot of that if you want to, or grab a shot of it with your phones. But that's the person to contact if you want to refer to the program. And I wanted to touch on this very false premise that for too long we've been accepting this, that everybody is better off in the community, right? There's a whole lot of movement to always be downgrading the level of support somebody gets because we don't believe that they need to be in an institution or in a higher level of support. They think everybody belongs in the community. I'm here to tell you that that's not working for several people, right? It's not working for the 140,000 people with serious mental illness who are homeless and on our streets. It's not working out for the 392,000 people who are either in jails or prisons. It's estimated about 380,000 are in our prisons and about 12,000 are in our county jails. And a recent stat I've learned from a couple different sources now, including NAMI National, is that it's estimated about 2 million people with serious mental illnesses are cycling through our county jails every year in our country. That is shameful, and we need to stop that. And the other place, very sadly, where people are ending up is in our graveyards. These people are not better off in the community with what we currently have available in the community. AOT is one solution in the community that we can provide that can help the people who do not know they're sick. It is an on-ramp to treatment to give them a chance to live a better life. Why am I personally invested? This is our son before he got sick. Last picture we have of him before he got sick is right here, before a homecoming dance over at West High. However, for the past 16 years, this has been his life. He's been one of those people going through those awful revolving doors that the judge spoke about earlier. He's gone through all these revolving doors of repeated hospitalizations, rehabs, residential care facilities, trying to live in our home and in the community, living in different group homes. It's not been until the past 2 years at the state hospital in Independence, where he's receiving excellent, structured, comprehensive health care, that he's actually started to show improvement. So for 14 years, all we did as a society was let him get worse and have more brain damage. I share the picture of the brains here because what I hope for people to know is that because we are not able to have somebody go into the hospital and stay there or some other level of care where they have enough support to actually figure out the medications, have a first episode psychosis education program so that they and their loved ones can learn about their illnesses and how to manage them. Because of all that we can't do that, we are actually causing people's brains currently to become so much more sick than they have to. And I am determined to change that trajectory for the next souls that get sick. Eric Smith is a wonderful example of somebody who graduated from one of these AOT programs. He actually graduated from the program in San Antonio with Judge Oscar Kazin, who you met in that video. Eric is an amazing, remarkable example of what can happen with these programs. His history was far worse than our son's. He had many more hospitalizations. He was jailed many times. He used drugs that are much more difficult to treat than our son did. And yet he graduated that program the second time he was admitted to it. Since then, he's graduated with honors with his master's in social work, recently passed his boards, and now he's working with people in San Antonio who have serious mental illness. And he does public speaking. He led a panel here, leading a discussion with Bradley Tarr, another AOT graduate, at the AOT symposium in October in San Antonio that the Treatment Advocacy Center hosted. Eric is doing remarkably well, and so are many, many others. There is hope for these people. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for listening. And I'm going to open it up for questions and stop the screen share here. So what questions do you have? Yeah, Danae.
So I'm a NAMI Connection facilitator leader in the Cedar Rapids Linn County group. And I know you mentioned that it's just for Linn County residents, but is there any sort of opportunity like this for people in Cedar Rapids?
Yeah, very much. When we applied for the funding with the ECR MHDS region, I will tell you that one of May Hinchton's first questions for me, among a comprehensive list, was, okay, are you interested in getting this going in other counties? And I, of course, replied, yes, because my next goal is to take this statewide. The first of which counties we really do want to target is Linn County. And that's very much within the region. She also really wants us to help facilitate it for Dubuque County. And I've had people from other regions reaching out to get information. HHS had me give a presentation for all the CEOs of the regions a couple of months ago, because the state also wants to have us start using AOT instead of only providing competency restoration for some people who do low-level offenses and end up in jail and then end up sitting in jail waiting for months to be able to go to the IMCC to have their competency restored. And then most often they just get released and have no help in the community. So there are a lot of efforts to get this expanded more.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Leslie, this is Joanna. Tell me more about the housing that might be, complementary to this.
Sure.
Because
so
we
the
know
housing
that there's always such a gap.
Yeah. And that's why one of the very first community partners I reached out to was Chrissy Canginelli over at the Shelter House. And she's had somebody from Shelter House involved with our program all along. Currently, it's Erin. And very much we have a commitment that they will be there to help assist us. Now, the housing might be someplace like at the Shelter House or one of their first housing first locations. It might also be scattered site because they have a lot of those in Johnson County as well. But it also might be a HAB home, and it could even be the RCF, right? It could be wherever that person needs that level of care to be. And I love to see that Roger's here too, because, you know, getting some housing even supported through successful living might be a possibility as well. Our commitment is that if that's an issue, we're going to be working to try to get that solved.
Thanks for the plug, Leslie.
Hi there. Any questions, you guys?
I'm more familiar with ACT or assertive community treatment. So could the two ever be blended somehow? Or I'm imagining that they could be, yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, the people from the ACT team at the university with Impact, Leah Appel, she's been part of the committee as well, and she came to the fall conference, the AOT conference over in San Antonio. And as she's sitting there during the first day, she goes, I finally get it. It's like ACT on steroids with a judge.
Yes.
And it really
exactly.
is. It's like that. So sometimes the people will be getting that as part of their comprehensive treatment plan, and sometimes not. It really is a case-by-case basis to figure out what each individual needs.
Yeah, that collaboration is going to be really important. I'm glad you know everyone. That helps.
Other questions?
Leslie, is the DOC being involved with any of the AOT programs?
The DOC is definitely one of the partners that we reached out to, and they're very much aware of the fact that we've gotten this program going. And I anticipate that we will have increased relationships with them, especially as we're working to have AOT somewhat replace competency restoration. But that's very much one of the people that we did reach out to. Early on in the process, you know, I knew nobody. And really it was Mary Masher who helped me set up a community talk where we invited, with her leverage of relationships, to get a lot of people to come to the table. And then at each meeting, I would basically just ask the person, who else don't I know that I need to talk to? And can you help connect me to them? And the DOC was one of those conversations, because I had no idea each judicial district had somebody with the DOC locally. That's truthfully how ignorant I was about the whole system.
It's a mess anyway, but yes.
Any other questions?
Leslie, this is Monica.
Hi there, Monica.
As someone who is not in need of care for anyone I know, how can we support this program?
That's a really good question. I would say support NAMI Johnson County. And maybe just if you see me posting about the AOT program or articles that are supportive of it on Facebook, share those, because I would be willing to bet $1 million that somebody you know has a loved one in need of care for mental illness. And the more that people know, the better.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
So, Leslie, I might just throw in a little input. Since you kind of mentioned our agency. So I'm Roger, I'm the director of Successful Living, and we are one of the, I guess I'll say, pilot providers, the agencies that are helping participate in the AOT program. Pretty early to kind of give it like a really good input, but I think it looks like a very promising program. There's a lot of potential with it and hopefulness too. And I know that the persons that would receive that or be part of that program would receive additional supports and help them become more successful. That's our ultimate goal, is for people to become more able, independent, and reduce their challenges. And with this AOT program, and thank you, Leslie, for being a part of it too. Everything you kind of are a part of, it just seems like it has extra, I don't know, possibilities and connections and things like that. So I'm excited that our agency is being on the ground floor of being able to be a part of it, and also just to kind of experience it too. And hopefully we'll see some good successes. And we're certainly not the only agency. I think it's like Johnson and Lynn counties are kind of the pilots right now. So we're excited.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for all that your agency does. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Can I share the person to contact for referrals again? Yes, I sure can. I think my easiest way to do that is to share the screen again and get to that slide, if that's okay. So Carrie Crane at unitypoint.org. Her work cell's 319-550-0694. And her work number is 319-688-8000.
Tell me again what like the first step would be if you got Carrie involved and you had a son or a daughter or someone who was maybe that first experience of psychosis. Again, they don't know they're sick. How might you persuade them, or do you get them involved in the justice system first, or what's that look like?
Yeah, hopefully not involved with the justice system first.
Right,
That's very
right.
much
We'd like to
avoid.
I mean, at least the system that is part of the AOT. I mean, not the justice system generic, but.
Yeah. So what I would do is have the person reach out to Carrie, and then Carrie could be the one to talk them through the steps. But more than likely, it's going to be a conversation with a physician to say, hey, I've heard about this program. I'd really like to consider whether, my son or my daughter or my husband, whoever it is, could be referred to this program. Would you be willing to recommend this type of a treatment order through the court system, through the civil court system? And Carrie would work on coordinate getting the order and getting the referral and doing an assessment to see if it's appropriate.
Great.
Yep. Yes, Danae.
I just wanted to make a suggestion. So the times that I've worked with people with schizophrenia, a lot of times they have a lot of trouble sleeping. They tend to have a lot of insomnia. And so one sort of way to persuade them to take medication could be that avenue. Like, I know that you're having trouble sleeping. This will help you sleep if you take it at bedtime. That might be kind of a gentle way to kind of, tailor it to their goals.
Yeah, I agree. And that's obviously part of the motivational interviewing that skilled clinicians know how to do, and skilled judges as well. So that's very much part of their engagement process to do. But I completely agree. And that's something, that example is a perfect example of knowledge that families don't have unless they get involved and take a lot of education, with family to family and other supports to learn about. Yep.
So I developed psychosis when I was 17, and that was a long time ago. I'm very much improved now, but at first my parents had trouble convincing me to go to a psychiatrist because, of course, I thought, oh, I don't need this, I'm fine. And I didn't know that I wasn't. But that was one of the things that was effective for me too, is knowing that, oh, this is going to help me sleep at night. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to, improve my thinking, even just with getting more sleep. So
that's awesome. And it's wonderful that your parents knew to do that as a technique. I think it's also one that Dr. Xavier Amador would recommend as well. His book, I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, very much in his training with the LEAP method. That's one of the things he recommends as well, is to try to figure out a different way in. And I'm so glad you're doing well.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. This means a lot.
Thank you. Any other questions, you guys? I tried to make it short and sweet, knowing that you mostly are joining on your lunch hours, and I wanted you not to have to be able to stay online for too long.
Well, this has been great. Any more questions? Like I said, we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. And, you know, every month we do these wonderful lunch and learns. And next month we're going to have a yoga teacher who's well known in the community, Betsy Britton-Trop, I believe is her last name. And she's going to talk about how yoga can benefit your emotional and mental well-being. And the month after that, we're going to talk about, and I'm going to say this wrong, TD, or tardive dyskinesia. Dyskinesia, right. Because so many of these medications that people take to help with psychosis can often result in uncomfortable and serious side effects. And one of those is that involuntary movement. And so we're going to be talking to an expert in that in August. So join us. Look for the invitation in your next NAMI newsletter. Yes, thank you so much, Leslie. You're such a benefit. You've benefited our community so much with your work.
Thanks.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for all of your work.
Yes. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for showing up.